From the Kabbalistic point of view, since we are meant to enter into a constant connection with the divine in everything we do, prayer becomes somewhat relativized, because if, throughout the entire day, from the moment I wake up until I go to sleep at night, I'm experiencing a divine connection, then my whole life becomes a prayer.
Hello, dear friends of Kabala Podcast. We are here again with MarioSaban.
Shalom, how are you?
Shalom, Mario. Coming off of a wonderful episode. From last time we were reviewing it.
I thought you were going to make like Dr. Spock.
I love Dr. Spock and Star Trek. I love this series.
You know where it comes from, right? But for people who don't know, we should say that Dr. Spock from Star Wars was Jewish. Most people don't realize that. And that the Vulcan salute was actually the priestly blessing. The priestly salute is with two hands. Okay? So remember this when you watch Star Wars?
Well, Star Trek.
Well, Star Trek it wasn't Star Wars.
Exactly. When I was a kid, I was a fan of Dr. Spock. I remember he was my favorite character.
You know what? When at one point Dr. Spock's son came to Spain, I was super excited to greet him, and I said to my wife, I want to greet Dr. Spock's son.
Leonard Nimoy.
Yes, he came to Spain. His father had already passed away years ago. So, well, nothing. With the greeting you gave, it reminded me of Vulcan.
Well, you're giving me the perfect lead into today's topic. Religious liturgy, automatism, or spiritual connection.
At the beginning, we both did a liturgical form, didn't we? With our hands.
Exactly.
From a Kabbalistic point of view, if we set religion aside for a moment and simply look at liturgy, the truth is that the moment you wake up and have the same breakfast every day, that's also a liturgy, because it's something mechanical. Some people wake up in the morning, read the newspaper, and there you have another form of liturgy, a subjective liturgy, if you will. The whole issue of liturgy is very particular, because there are souls that genuinely connect with the divine through liturgy. Therefore, one cannot make a general criticism of liturgy. The fact that liturgy may not be the most important thing for the nature of my own soul does not mean that the same is true for everyone. I remember my experience in Montevideo when my friend Max Godet was the rabbi of the community there. Later he moved to Miami, and he made a passionate case in favor of liturgy that I fully understood. Many people approached me and said, I connect with the divine through liturgy, and that is perfectly valid. So I feel that, on one hand, for those souls who genuinely connect with the divine through liturgy, they have all my respect and affection. But on the other hand, there is a large group of people, and I include myself among them, for whom liturgy is not so essential. I believe much more in spontaneous prayer. The thing is, spontaneous prayer arises from a real spiritual need, whereas liturgy is often an imposed obligation that can easily become mechanical. And once something becomes mechanical, I'm not sure whether the person is still connecting or just repeating like an automatic machine. Without criticizing those who need liturgy, I do think that overly automated liturgy is like an automated factory. There's nothing handcrafted about it. Spontaneous prayer is much more connected to my inner life, to my genuine need to connect with the divine when I choose to, independently of an institutional regulated religious framework, which in many ways aims primarily to create community. And even if people who are praying don't actually feel any spiritual connection, the act of gathering as a community already fulfills a certain purpose. Sometimes liturgy becomes more of a social or sociological phenomenon, a way of reinforcing a congregation, than an act of spiritual connection. So that's where we need to look carefully to understand what we're really talking about. If you go because you want to strengthen your community, that's perfectly fine. Just don't disguise the strengthening of the congregation as a spiritual connection. Because unless there are truly exceptional cases of people who genuinely enter into connection every single time they pray, I seriously doubt that someone who prays every day manages to connect every day. At some point, it inevitably becomes mechanical. And again, those who want to do it, and as long as they're not bothering anyone and they're moving positive energy, should absolutely keep doing it. But if it becomes hollow, if it's a liturgy performed simply because it must be done, without awareness and without connection, then I think, well, that's an issue. But of course, we have no way to prove any of this. I can't know who is praying with real connection and who is praying with none. From a Kabbalistic perspective, since we are meant to be in constant connection with the divine in everything we do, prayer becomes somewhat relativized. Because if, throughout the entire day, from the moment I wake up until I go to sleep, and even through the night, I'm feeling a divine experience of connection, then my whole life becomes a prayer. My life becomes an act of connection. Now, those who need to pray because their daily life makes them forget the connection, because they spend the whole day dealing with material matters and lose sight of the spiritual, I understand why they need to pray. I believe those who need prayer need a space designed outside the material field. And those of us who remain connected to the spiritual world all the time, studying spiritual subjects, naturally relativize prayer because we already feel in permanent connection. When someone feels permanently connected, because everything is seen as sacred, there's no need to reserve a special space for it. When I do reserve a special space, I reserve it for study, and I feel that this space of study functions as prayer because it functions as connection. So prayer becomes relativized for me because I'm already studying. My study is my connection. Therefore, someone who can't study anything biblical or anything related to Kabbalah throughout the day, I understand if such a person says, well, I'll pray for 10 minutes because this is the only moment of connection I have. But for those of us who work 24 hours a day in service of connection, when the time for prayer arrives, I feel like, why would I pray if in reality I've been praying all day?
If you'll allow me, I'd like to share my own experience regarding what you're saying. I talk about this quite often with my Mora. We study Torah twice a week, and I can't help but bring up the concept of kavana, the intention with which one performs the liturgy. I don't have an orthodox practice, but I do have to acknowledge that, for example, Shabbat is a very particular and special moment for me. Even though I experience this spirituality 24/7, constantly, for me, there is something about that hour of the day, that moment when I say, okay, I'm going to focus on this, and I make the chala with focus, with kavana, with concentration, trying to perceive that shejina that descends. It gives me a very beautiful inner feeling. And it's also something I share with my youngest son, and perhaps that is ultimately the essence of it all, that beyond forms, norms, and structures, what truly sanctifies the moment is the sincerity of the heart and the awareness with which we choose to enter that sacred space, because in the end, every gesture becomes meaningful only when it grows out of an inner truth, and every sacred act is nothing more and nothing less than the echo of a soul that chooses to be present.
Of course, I particularly agree with you regarding the Shabbat scene. But with respect to the Shabbat scene, it is not extrapolable to praying 3 times a day every day.
I understand.
I mean, we're talking about something mechanical, not something you do once a week, where on that particular day you genuinely feel that you've detached a bit more from the material world. That I do feel. I really do feel, especially regarding Shabbat, because that disconnection is necessary. But what I'm talking about is daily prayer. I mean, in Catholic terms, it would be daily Mass. In the Muslim world, the daily prayers. Or in the Jewish world, the daily davening. I'm talking about the everyday, the daily routine. It's 7 in the morning and I have to pray. Do I have to pray? Why do I have to pray? At 7 in the morning, I'm completely out of it. The one who would be praying isn't even me because I haven't fully woken up yet.
Your neshama has not yet arrived.
Yes, my neshama hasn't arrived yet. That's why my classes are in the afternoon.
That's why you're so connected.
My neshama is still floating on the other side. I spend many hours in the morning where my neshama are still floating among the realms of the dead. So I'm in a state of deep connection. And yet they expect me at 7 in the morning. There are people, for example, many students from the school, my own students, whom I truly admire. Honestly, I admire them because they do tikkun hatzot. I don't know if you do it. They wake up at 3:30, 4 in the morning.
I just wake up.
Yes, I understand, but 10 you can go to sleep. I can't stay half an hour reading, so of course this is according to the nature of the soul. So I understand, I agree with you on the subject of Shabbat because it seems to me I don't feel it as a liturgical act. I feel it as a day where we enter into a situation of inner stillness and sacred clarity that naturally lifts the soul, where the matter in a certain way has to disappear, and the worries have to be deactivated. So it seems to me that the prayer of the bread, of the wine, the washing of hands makes you enter into that frequency. I was talking more about what we might call the daily prayers. And within the daily prayers, I also understand that there are souls who, by their very nature, are able to connect through that daily practice. There are many people who pray every day, even doing tikkun hatzot. I understand that a person who studies Torah and Kabbalah every day, as is the case for me and for many students, naturally ends up relativizing formal prayer, because in a way it's as if we're praying constantly. When you're studying Kabbalah for 4, 5, 6 hours, you're essentially in a state of ongoing prayer.
Yes.
That's the feeling. So I say, no, I'm going to stop reading Gershom Sholem because I'm going to read the mechanical liturgy. It's an interruption of something that I feel that if my connection was going the other way, why do I have to interrupt it for the mechanical liturgy, unless I need that liturgy as a method of connection? Now, I understand that those who are totally in the material world, a merchant, for example, who is totally in the material world, or a dentist who all the time is with the teeth, or all those who are not in the subject of study, meditation, because the great majority of people do not work studying and meditating. The vast majority of people work in material matters. And many people in the field of matter. The Tikkun Hatzot, the midnight prayer, or the prayers during the day, they have like small doses of connection in the day. So I understand that they have a very big need. But someone who is studying Kabbalah for 4, 5, 6 hours, and then suddenly says, now I'm going to pray. Well, what was I doing during the previous 5 hours while studying Kabbalah? I was already praying. And if you're doing the Isaac Luria mantras for 4 hours straight, these incredibly powerful methods of connection, am I really going to interrupt that with a mechanical liturgy? It doesn't bring me any benefit because I'm already in connection. That's why I believe that once we enter the Messianic era, at some point the Messianic era will be a time of permanent study of Torah and Kabbalah, and eventually liturgy will become relativized. So if you ask me, then what role will liturgy play? In my view, liturgy will remain as a framework for communal gathering or as an expression of identity. That's where it will sit. But I don't see it as a form of connection, unless, and I repeat, you're immersed in the material world. If you're in the world of materiality, then you urgently need Shabbat and the daily interruptions of prayer. But if you are in constant study of Kabbalah and you feel in a state of permanent connection, it's not that you go up a level, you actually go down. When you're in the material world and you stop to pray, you go up a level because prayer reconnects you. But when you're in the study of Kabbalah and you stop to pray, I don't see that as going up any further. You're already in a very high energetic state of connection. So interrupting that with a mechanical prayer feels like dropping down a level. That's why my experience is very sui generis, because the vast majority of people are not in my situation or in the situation of those who study Kabbalah and Torah constantly. When I'm in a yeshiva and I see everyone studying, I find it contradictory that we all stop to pray. Why stop to pray? If you're studying Maimonides, Nachmanides, the Shulchan Aruch, the Talmud, if you are already in connection through the study itself, unless you say, no, this is a congregational act, a sociological moment. Okay, then it's a sociological act, because we want the 15 people who are there to gather, because we're friends, because we want a communal moment. That, to me, makes perfect sense. But that's a social gathering which uses liturgy as an excuse, and that's totally valid. What I don't accept is the claim that in all cases it's a moment of genuine connection. In short, when the inner connection is alive, the ritual becomes optional, and when the inner connection is absent, the ritual alone can never supply it.
Give me just a moment. We'll be back in about 15 seconds, and then we'll pick things up and keep the conversation flowing.
Hey Mario, you're looking tan from the lights. What's going on with you?
I don't see you. Who are you?
Here, I am Nacho.
Hey, Nacho. How are you? This light is killing me. I need sunglasses.
Listen, there's another eye watching us. There are a lot of people back there. Hey, you, over there on the other side. Give it a like, subscribe, and join us. And if you want to collaborate in a more active way, here there is a QR that allows you to help us to continue and keep doing this podcast. You also have it in the link below in the comments. And on this Patreon, you'll find an online Kabbalah course in English to help transform your life and become happier. Mario, next time?
Sunglasses. Umbrella.
Yes, umbrella.
Well, Mario, while we were talking and during the break, I took the chance to jot down a few thoughts. One of them is that liturgy, in my view, is nothing more and nothing less than a systematization of connection. Perhaps a reminder for those who don't naturally experience their relationship with the Creator or with the transcendent. Then there's the mystical idea of what our relationship with the Creator actually is, which is an individual relationship. And in that sense, I understand exactly what you're saying. I would also add, be careful not to turn study itself into a form of fundamentalism and become a fundamentalist of study.
I don't want to attack liturgical fundamentalism. I simply want to point out that without inner awareness, form alone loses
To
its meaning.
establish the fundamentalism of study.
Well, in that sense, you know what I'm thinking? I'm thinking about Maimonides, because Maimonides clearly said that in the Messianic era, we are going to study all day long.
Everyone to study all the time.
I don't consider it fundamentalism, because the more you study,
Less fundamentalist you are.
that's it exactly, you are fast. You understood the concept very quickly. This is how it is. The more you study, the more free thinking you are, and the more connection with divinity. And that's the Messianic era. So I don't consider myself a study fundamentalist, but what I do think is, it's not a criticism of the feel-good liturgical act. There are liturgical acts that really impress me. There are liturgical acts that are really impressive. What happens is that the liturgical act, as you were saying, if I'm truly doing it from within, must carry that concept of kavana, the intentionality that should guide every act, not just the liturgical act. Because if you reduce kavana only to tefillah, only to prayer, you're not making a mistake, but you are reducing it. It becomes a kind of reductionism, whereas when you free the concept of kavana, you see that when I'm studying, for example, I have super kavana. So, since I have kavana when I'm studying, that intention, just as Cordovero said, clearly directs the flow of energy. Therefore, if I already have a system that works for me, which is classical music combined with study as a way to connect with the divine, What external authority can tell me that I must pray or must not pray? Regarding Shabbat, I don't observe it because the law says it must be observed. I do it because my heart has the kavana, the intention of wanting to observe Shabbat. In other words, I don't observe it because of the law. I observe it from the heart. My heart feels that observance, and therefore my soul resonates with it. Because if I were doing it only because of the law, it would mean I don't truly feel it, and I'm not really connected. I would just be acting out of external obligation, and everything we do because of the law and not from the heart. On the day we disobey the law, we have no heart left to sustain the act, and we simply stop doing it.
Of course.
When the law disappears, and what remains is the connection, Abraham's bond with the divine came from his heart. The Torah didn't exist. The law didn't exist. Even though later the Pharisees invented the idea that Abraham already fulfilled the law, even though the law didn't yet exist. But I don't want to get into that legal artifice of making Abraham comply with something that didn't exist in his time. It is an artifice. Saying that Abraham was Muslim, or Christian, or Jewish, these legal maneuvers from the three religions trying to claim Abraham, is absurd. Abraham was not Jewish, Christian, or Muslim. He had no religion at all. And since Abraham had no religion, his religare, his bond, was through his heart, through his soul, directly. There was no law imposing anything on him. It was through his own emunah, his own faith, that he connected with the divine. I feel that I observe Shabbat, not because the law says so, but because my own emunah leads me to connect through Shabbat. I do it from the heart, because that is what feels most genuine. If you fulfill something only because of the law, it's like saying, I won't park here because there's a law, and I'll get a fine. But once the law disappears, then you'll park there because there's no fine anymore.
And a lot of attention and a lot of care with complying with the liturgy, and then being a person lacking empathy, behaving badly with the other.
Well, then we get into cases of inner imbalance in the observance of the liturgy. Of course, I have the mechanical liturgy, and then I have the mechanical liturgy.
Yes.
Theft and lying.
I fulfill, and then I do anything.
But for that reason, the external Torah in the external fulfillment is something very suspicious. Like all religious external fulfillment is suspect. That is also a person who goes to church and does not help the beggar outside.
Of course.
Everything he said in church in that liturgy, a lot of it is useless. So what I'm getting at is, these liturgies where you think that by an external act alone you will accomplish your tikkun are a bad idea. Tikkun is internal, and the liturgy must reflect your tikkun. Therefore, I perform the Shabbat liturgy as a reflection of my tikkun, not as an observance of an external law while I am unbalanced. For example, if I argue with my brother all day and then enter Shabbat as a saint, what meaning do I have in Shabbat if I'm fighting with my brother? No, you observe Shabbat because of the Torah? Yes, you observe Shabbat because of the Torah, but you are not doing your tikkun. You are deceiving yourself with the external act.
Yes.
This is what I want to emphasize. I think we are touching the central point. Do not be confused by external acts. If I take the external acts of Torah observance as they are, I am treating them like idols that are going to save me. That's what idolaters did. Idolaters believed that external idols, those little statues, those threads, would save them. But the statue does not save you, just as the external act of Torah observance does not save you if it is not accompanied by tikkun. Otherwise, you are creating an idol as well.
Of course, you're saying that being a fanatic, let's say, about the liturgy, is to idolize the act itself, turning the form into an end rather than a pathway toward genuine inner transformation.
The thing is, if you are not doing the personal tikkun work and are only performing an external act, that external act is not actually rectifying you. This external act is a screen, a disguise for a soul that isn't being rectified. It may rectify or it may not. I'm not saying that everyone who performs liturgy fails to rectify themselves.
Acts are very important. What is happening is that we are emphasizing acts of a liturgical nature. That is to say, all acts are acts. Acts is, I behave well with you, that's an act.
You have
an
to
action.
divide moral acts from liturgical acts.
There it is. That's why
That was already divided by St. Justin in the 2nd century. In the 2nd century, he said, one thing are the ethical acts,
and the other liturgical acts.
That's it.
I'm talking about the liturgical matters, not about the ethical acts.
But what happens is that in the Jewish world, and in all religions, the mitzvot are confused with everything together. That is to say, love of neighbor with putting on phylacteries.
And you can hate your neighbor and wear phylacteries, or love your neighbor and don't wear them, or do both. So you have like 3 personality types.
The one who fulfills a liturgical act but not the ethical one. The one that fulfills the ethical one and not the liturgical act. Or the one that fulfills the liturgical and the ethical. That is why we cannot generalize.
Right.
So, I am not saying that the one who fulfills liturgical is condemned. I am saying that the one who fulfills a liturgical act,
without doing tikkun, because he does not do the ethical acts, is creating an idol. That is idolatry. Because people think that idolatry is only statues.
Yes, I know.
No, idolatry is not only with statues. Idol is everything that we believe that externally, other than the Ein Sof, will help us and save us. It means that I fulfill it because I am going to have a reward.
No, then you are not fulfilling it from the heart. Your intention is the reward.
So the fulfillment has to be from the heart, not for the reward. That is, I am fulfilling Shabbat because it is good for my soul, and it connects my soul with divinity.
Not because it says or does not say in the Torah.
Because this is an external situation.
It is interesting what you say because dogmatisms and fanaticisms are idolizing a way of thinking.
Absolutely, of course it is that. But for that reason, the liturgy that seems to be anti-idolatrous of the monotheists, of what I call the monotheistic trilateral, which is Islam, Christianity, and Judaism,
we all have a problem.
I do not know about other cultures. The problem is that this image, and we return to the subject of the image, this external idolatrous image,
can be transformed in the liturgy itself. That is to say, the liturgy itself creates the image.
You participate in that liturgical act, and through that liturgical act you believe that magically you are going to become good, or you are going to rectify your interior, and your interior is the same. So, you do not rectify. That is to say, a person who has an imbalance and does not correct it by his external work. I give you the test, that you change your religion. If you are a Christian, if you are a Muslim, if you are a Buddhist, you will see that the imbalance remains. It remains the same.
So, it's not the religious conversion that makes you a better person.
Because you realize that what happens is that your imbalance stays with you until you don't work on it inside.
That is to say, if there is no personal tikkun in your interior of connection with the divinity,
the mechanical liturgy is not going to save you. So, unless you enter into the liturgy, looking for the meaning of the liturgy, by connecting with your intentionality, and you find in the words of the liturgy the entrance doors to your tikkun,
which you can also find, but there you have to reflect on what you are saying. It does not have to be a mechanical act.
Thank you, Mario.
My pleasure. Shalom.
Shalom.